Okay, it says we're live. It didn't even ask me if I wanted to do like the test. Like, hey, you sure you want to go live? I don't think we're live just on YouTube yet. So hang on. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're. I think we're up and rolling here. So this week, Revolutionary Roulette. We are starting off with A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, and Chapter 1 is Columbus, the Indians, and Human Progress. And get ready.
with the lack of human progress being
the lack of human progress. Yeah. Yes. We'll get there. So let's start off with the this is a good one. So it's straight from Chris Columbus himself. He wrote in his log, "They brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things, which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawk's bells. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built, with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms, and they do not know them, for I showed them a sword. They took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want."
It started out with Christopher Columbus immediately downplaying the human life that he has come across, that he has no clue about whatsoever. He's granted, this is 1492. I believe they set sail in October. So
I think they landed in October, and they landed in he's talking about the Arawaks of the Bahama Islands.
Okay, so they landed in October, and he's already speaking coarsely, to say it gently, about people he's just met. And I get it. It's 1492, and there's not too much in the way of sophistication, and that's going to be an argument or an arguing point throughout this book. However, these idiots grabbed the sword by the wrong end and cut themselves. All they did was give us everything that they had and wanted to make friends and tried to be cordial.
Come on in.
Today's standards, which is pretty much the exact definition of sophisticated, classified, dignified. But
yeah. So again, we were talking about receipts last week. These are directly from Christopher Columbus's log, his diary. There were transcripts that were transcribed. So let's start off with another one from Columbus wrote, "As soon as I arrived in the Indies, on the first island which I found, I took some of the natives by force in order that they might learn and might give me information of whatever there is in these parts." What did he want?
In these parts.
Gold. He wanted all the gold. So he's like, I'm taking you captive, and you're going to tell me where the gold is.
He basically considered, well, first of all, I hopefully I'm not jumping too far in regards to your notes or preparation. But first of all, he considered himself, and others considered him, to be a master sailor, along with tapestry and many other great professions. And 33 days into a trip to Asia, he ends up in what he thinks is Asia.
Right.
And it's definitely not Asia. It's Hispaniola, which is now modern day Cuba and the Dominican Republic area. I think he originally landed in what's now the Bahamas.
Right. So, he moves on and he goes to Hispaniola, which is like you mentioned, now the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So we'll get there in a second. And so this is from Howard Zinn. Like informed people of his time, he knew the world was round and he could sail west in order to get to the Far East.
Gotcha.
But Columbus he wouldn't have made it to Asia. He wildly miscalculated. He thought the world was much, much smaller. So, for as smart as this guy is, when it comes to knowing how big the world is, he's a dumbass. So, imagine a much smaller world. And let's see. So he's on this expedition for Spain. Here's a quick note about Spain. Its population was mostly poor peasants, worked for the nobility, who were 2% of the population and owned 95% of the land. That sounds really familiar.
It's so funny how that era translates so perfectly into today.
Talk about like Bernie Sanders, the top 1% of the 1%.
I feel so bad for you. He's the one that got away. And I know we're not trying to get into today's political aspects, but I know you have a fondness in your heart for Bernie. And I just want to say, I feel you, brother. I feel you.
So going back to your, where he landed. So the reason he was going, he told them like, I will go there. I'll go to India. And he's like, I just need 10% of the profits. And you have to give me a new title called Admiral of the Ocean Sea. Like
10% of the profits is what he was assuming was going to be copious amounts of gold. What they did realize was there was abundance of different spices, and he was also going to get to be, I believe this is the proper terminology, governorship of the newfound territories that he embarked upon. So those were just some other things besides the 10% and the Admiral of the Open Sea title. So sounded like he was making great bargaining chips, but he eventually ends up. We'll get there.
Yeah. All right, hang on 1 second because we might have a slight technical difficulty. So hang on 1 second, everybody.
Gotcha. Yeah, folks, bear with us. We hear echo on our end, so we're trying to fix it real quick, see if we can get rid of it. I moved my mic back, tried to adjust it, turn it down a little bit. Hopefully that will take care of the issue. Has anybody ever told you your determined face is sexy as hell?
No. So thank you. I'll take it.
You're very welcome.
I just want to test something on this.
Sexy as hell.
No.
So
Clip that. Save it.
I don't know why it keeps going to.
Sexy as hell. So clip that. Save it.
Already clipped it. All right, hang on.
Got YouTube on mute.
I mean, I have just like the sound coming out of my computer so that there's no feedback, which, we can't.
Last time we did it and there was no feedback, I had on a set of cans. Let's see if that fixes the issue. I might be the only person in the world that actually checks for the L and the R when you put on a set of headphones. But
no, I do this. I do the same thing.
How are we looking on feedback now? Not so bad, not so good, same.
No, I mean, no feedback here.
Okay.
All right, we got. we got it on YouTube now. I don't know what the issue was. I didn't really do anything besides you plugging in your headphones. Yo, turn me up in the headphones. Please tell me I turned that up. Yeah. Okay. All right. Ready to move on.
All right, folks, we're learning on the fly.
Okay. So Columbus never would have made it to Asia, wildly miscalculated. And I kind of wish that would have happened. I kind of wish he just died in the middle of the ocean, and we would have ended up here some other way.
Some sort of scumbaggery would have taken place between now and then. But you do kind of wish he had the Gilligan Island treatment. Like Gilligan was a 3-hour tour and his was a 33-day tour. So we're looking at 1,000% increase. But anyway, continue, sir.
So this is my favorite part of the whole chapter. We're only on chapter 3 here. I'm sorry, on page 3. So on October 12th, this settles was it October when they got there in October. October 12th, a sailor called Rodrigo saw the early morning moon shining on white sands and cried out. So he must have said something like "land ho" or whatever, they say, or I see some land.
Yeah.
And the first man to see land was supposed to get this yearly pension of what at the time was 10,000 maravedis for life. But Rodrigo never got it. Columbus said, I saw that last night. Where were you? I saw that last night. So Rodrigo never got paid. Columbus, the shitbag, got the yearly payment of 10,000 maravedis.
I did some research on maravedis.
Okay.
This isn't really important to the podcast whatsoever, but I put in a lot of effort to this. And
you Googled maravedis, yeah.
Well, I did more than that because I had to use mathematician stuff.
Oh.
So
I hope you had an eraser.
Maravedis, what was it? 10 maravedis?
10,000 for
10,000 maravedis was essentially $75 in today's standards because you had to convert maravedis into pesos, actually into something else, then to pesos.
Okay.
And then each dollar US is right around 20 pesos. And I'm spent. But
so all that for $75
back then, which could have been was obviously a substantial amount of money, but still Rodrigo got fucked big time.
Big time. I saw that last night. You were sleeping
out, man. I see this. What are you talking about, Rodrigo? I wanted to get shit out yesterday.
Rodrigo, get your head out of your ass.
Go get the rum.
So, because the Arawaks didn't have any iron, but what they did have, the metal that they did have, was a little bit of gold, which they had like these gold ornaments in their ears, or earrings. I was gonna make an awful joke about how much does it cost to pierce your ears. It's about $1 an ear.
Because they're safe.
I'm sorry. I still did. I'm just gonna leave right now. All right. So it gets so much worse. It's not even funny. Like that part was my favorite part, but it gets way shittier from here on out, because they actually they like crashed the boat into the island. So the boat was wrecked. For as great a sailor that he was, he still crashed on the land and had to recycle the wood from the Santa Maria.
He was essentially John Candy in Summer Rental when him and Scully originally set out to learn how to sail in the Fort Lauderdale area. For those of you who have seen the movie Summer Rental, you know what I'm saying. Continue, Robert.
Nobody gets your 1980s references.
It was a good film.
Columbus sails to what is now Cuba from the Bahama Islands, and there he sees in the rivers there are little golden bits of gold. And I my thought went straight to, if you've ever had the drink Goldschlager, the little gold flakes at the bottom of the bottle. So I'm like imagining that, but Columbus took that as like there's these wild visions of gold fields, and he needs these Indians to show him where the gold fields are, because he needs to pay back Ferdinand and Isabella for this expedition that they sent them on.
Because he made promises that his ass couldn't keep. That's what I was going to get to. He essentially had so many people invest in his
this little expedition.
Exactly. And he sees these little flakes that ends up being so difficult to mine in the long run and in the grand scheme of things. And it's essentially just visions of grandeur that leads him astray.
Yes.
Along with being a richer. So
visions of grandeur. That's very well said. So with the timbers from the Santa Maria that he crashed on the land, he builds a cute little fort, just a cute military base, the first one on the Western Hemisphere. And he called it Navidad, Christmas, because it's like Christmas when you enslave Indians and kill them for gold, right?
Right.
So he leaves all the crew members there, and he's like, find the gold, store it at the fort, do whatever you need to, kill these people, torture them, to tell them for them to tell you where all the gold is, all the spices, all the metals. Get all of it however you can. They immediately get into a fight with some Indians who refuse to trade as many bows and arrows that he and his men wanted. So immediately kills two of them with their swords. Off to a great start. As soon as he lands in Cuba, he's gonna kill two people. Great.
I don't think a conscience played much of a role back then. And as we said, this book translates very well into today's scheme of things. And conscience is an afterthought in today's market as well.
That's exactly right. So Christopher Columbus, he starts to write down descriptions of the land where he is. So here's a quote from him. Hispaniola is a miracle. Mountains and hills, plains and pastures are both fertile and beautiful. The harbors are unbelievably good. That's probably all true. Here's where the lies come in. There are many wide rivers, of which the majority contain gold. There are many spices and great mines of gold and other metals. Columbus reported regarding the Indians, they are so naive and so free with their possessions that no one who has not witnessed them would not believe it. When you ask for something they have, they never say no. To the contrary, they offer to share with anyone. I know we'll wrap up this part with as much gold as they need and as many slaves as they ask. So that's what he's trying to bring back to the Majesties.
He's bargaining. He's using the slaves as a bargaining chip, because after he realizes that the lands are not as fertile as his deceptive eyes have thought, he's like, okay, fuck it. I can't get you gold, but you know what I can get you? A shit ton of Arawak.
Yep.
Let's do it. So he ends up. Go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say one of the worst parts for me. It's full of this hiding behind religion and doing it for religious reasons. So another quote from, "Thus the eternal God, our Lord, gives victory to those who follow his way over apparent impossibilities." So, let's just, again, enslave people, murder them in the name of the Lord. Double chest tap, Sky Point.
Body of Christ. To throw in a quick disclaimer, that was the way they were taught. By no means am I defending the actions of Christopher Columbus, but to fear the Lord, Savior, God, Jesus Christ, was exactly how they were brought up in that day and time, and that's carried on throughout century after century, 500 centuries later. Okay, so in his defense, he's speaking that terminology to the kings and queens which fronted his embarkment to a foreign land. Whether today and you're listening and you have a religious belief in Christianity, or you're an atheist or Muslim, we're not trying to offend anybody when we talk about these different things. But what we are saying is that the backing of your malicious activities because Jesus Christ wrote a passage, or there was a passage written in biblical terms that you can use to defend your actions is bullshit. So
that's exactly right. So because Columbus, so he goes back to the Majesties and he's like, "I'm telling you, there's just so much. I can't. I'm telling you, there's so much gold there. It's not even funny." So instead of 3 ships, they give him, and I think it was a crew of 39 men. They give him 17 ships with 1,200 men, and it went from, maybe go there, get some gold, and maybe spread some Catholicism while you're there. But no, when you send that many men, you're looking for maybe 2 things: gold and slaves. That's it. So they went from, island hopping and just taking as many Indian captives as they possibly could.
Yeah, it's it doesn't take a history professor to say that the way that things went about back in them times were awful and wrong, and but they were, a word that we so often use today, they were savages in and of themselves because they didn't know any better. So their way of getting things that they wanted / needed was to massacre. And by doing so, instead of creating bonds and relationships that possibly could have furthered their intercontinental trade relations, if they would have had a broader thought of things. Granted, I get it. We're just talking about the 14th century, or excuse me, 13th century. So they could have been about it many different ways, but this was kind of ingrained into their psyche.
So another one of my favorite parts here, on when they get back to Haiti with their 17 ships. I don't know if all 17 ships got there, but when they get back to
Haiti, his sailing, I doubt
it. They found that the sailors that they left behind at Fort Navidad, they all been killed in battle with the Indians. The sailors, it's hard to even call them sailors because they're just like committing these atrocious crimes on humanity. But we'll call them sailors, I guess. I don't know what else to call them right now.
And you take away the fact that not everybody that he threw onto this boat to help him travel across the country has experience in being a sailor. He just grabbed as many bodies as possible to help him load up the ship with the riches of another land. So these people aren't experienced. They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
No, they're basically laborers.
Yeah, for us to call them sailors is an insult to my intelligence, which is saying a shit.
So the sailors, they went roaming the islands as gangs, and looking for the gold, but they were also taking children and women as sex slaves, and also, of course, for labor. So I probably should have said trigger warning before that, but
there's going to be a part coming up soon. I'm assuming that we're definitely going to need the trigger warning. So
yeah, so there's a whole lot of it. I mean, a lot of this stuff just goes on and on. It's this similar stories, just told in a different way. More Columbus quotes: "Let us, in the name of the Holy Trinity, go on sending all the slaves that can be sold." That makes me feel real good.
I wish I would have. They spoke of, I don't know if you might have captured it in your notes. I failed to, but they go on to speak of different passages, some from Romans, some from Psalms, and it would have been nice to be able to correlate that into the proper spots during this broadcast. Just quickly to paraphrase, to the best of my knowledge, and I don't know the book or verse in Romans in which they were speaking of, but let us bring our light to the nations who have nothing but darkness. So they're essentially saying that the only reason this place is considered a country is because we stumbled across it, even though there was residents, indigenous people already there living their lives peacefully, albeit that just because they stumbled on it in the name of Christianity, it is now considered a land, which is a stretch. But
yeah,
to be kind.
Right. So remind me, page 14. Once we get to the Puritans, then we'll read Psalm 2:8 and Romans 13 too.
Okay.
So now Columbus is like, shit. There's just like no fucking gold here. I came here looking for gold. There's none. There's just these beautiful Arawaks who I'm just trying to enslave. So there's no golden fields. And Spain is like, we gave you 17 ships, 1,200 men. Don't come back empty-handed.
Right.
He didn't. He didn't come through with the gold, but he came through with the slaves. So
500 of which I believe, correct?
Right.
So, in the first embarkment.
Yeah. So let's go. Let's quote Zinn here. In the year 1495, they went on a great slave raid, rounded up 1,500 Arawak men, women, and children, put them in pens guarded by Spaniards and dogs, then picked the 500 best specimens to load onto ships. Of those 500, 200 died en route. The rest arrived alive in Spain, where they were put up for sale by the archdeacon of the town.
It's almost as if that was the Amazon for scumbags back in 1495.
Yeah. It's just, it sucks, man. It makes me angry because there are kids in cages right now at the U.S. Mexico border. And right here, we're talking about what put them in pens and guarded by Spaniards. They're guarded by ICE, right?
Right.
This is 1492. We're in 2021.
And not much has changed. And you throw into the fact that we're nearing October. These people's habits were of vast nakedness, to hardly cover themselves.
Right.
Okay. And they're being tossed into these huts, if you will, or cages, or whatever you want to term them as. And you know that they're not getting any of the proper coverage, clothing, blankets. So many of which are soon to die off because of that. And also, when we get to the part where they're on the ship, they're going to have difficulties as well.
I hope I get to the part that you're talking about and I don't miss it. But here's more brutality for the folks. So quoting Zink, Columbus, desperate to pay back dividends to those who had invested, had to make good his promise to fill the ships with gold. In the province of Cacao on Haiti, they ordered all persons 14 years or older to collect a certain quantity of gold every 3 months. When they brought it, they were given copper tokens to hang around their necks. Indians found without a copper token had their hands cut off and bled to death.
It seems like a bit of a I'm drawing a blank for words here, but it seems like it's going against the exact opposite of what they're trying to happen. It seems like they're coming up short on looking for gold because there is no fucking gold. So let's just cut off their hands so they can't do anything else. And what they essentially do, because they didn't have anything remotely close to modern medicine in general at all, they probably didn't know much of tourniquets, anything. So when they cut their hand off, they would bleed to death. And that was it. So they were useless at that point.
The task was impossible.
Exactly. So instead of just having them do manual labor or continue to keep trying, they kill. And that seems to be the mindset of a lot of people in a lot of different areas through a lot of this book. And it is rather long.
Yeah. So again, it was just like these little bits of dust in the rivers that they're so again, impossible task. And finally the Arawaks were like, dude, like, fuck this. Fuck you guys. So they try to put together an army and just put up some kind of resistance. But their tools were made out of sugar cane that was sharpened to a point. That was their spear. That was like the main weapon that they had, where the Spaniards had armor, muskets, horses, swords. So it was really easy to just basically whip some Arawak ass. And so the Arawaks, they start to consume cassava poison and committing mass suicides just to save themselves from the brutality of the Spaniards, because as much as they were killing them, they were putting them to work with the trying to find the gold and then enslaving them and bringing them back to Spain. And I mean, mothers were feeding their infants and killing their own babies to keep them away from these atrocities. So in 2 years, through murder, mutilation, or suicide, half of the 250,000 Indians that were on Haiti were dead.
It's a mother's natural instinct to protect her children. I feel weird speaking about that because I'm not a father, I'm not a mother, but this much can be brutally honest and pretty much self-known by anybody who has a relationship with someone who is a mother. Your natural instinct is to protect your children at all costs. And so these mothers were making split-second decisions. I don't want to say informed decisions, but more as I'll be damned decisions if the Spaniards are going to be the ones to take my family from me. I would rather feed poison to my children and meet them in the afterlife to try again than let them get their hands on my babies.
Right. I'm going to go out the way, the way we want to go out, not the way you want to.
We've lived on our land,
but yeah,
in our terms, and all of a sudden it changes in the blink of an eye. And then there were also mothers at certain points throughout chapter 1 that and basically the Columbus dealing with the Arawaks, that they decided that they were going to drown their children as well, just to put them out of their misery and not have to worry about what kind of torture the Spaniards had in store.
Yeah.
And that's rough. That's a tough pill to swallow, no matter how negative an outlook you hold on politics, history. Like I said, most individuals were not civilized back then, but regardless, that's a difficult pill to swallow.
Right. And even talking about different eras, going back to World War II, where, Japanese whole families that, mothers and, taking their children with them, jumping off of cliffs, all, committing mass suicides because of the propaganda that was out there that, they're going to, Americans are going to enslave you. And, this is a similar situation 450 years later.
Same thing happened to a lot of the Jewish folks in the concentration camps.
Right.
So it's not something that was just dealt with early on. Even when civilization did become civilized, you still had to deal with monsters and their thought processes on how to go about dealing with everyday people. And most of them did not know how to put together rational thought, let alone give a fuck about humanity.
Right.
So many times throughout this book, humanity has had to give way to riches or bargaining chips or trading platforms or money. Mm-hmm. And this is all symptoms of the things that we now deal with in modern day government. So from 1495, which is the year we're currently in this book, until 2021, there is a lot of things that haven't changed. And that deep down is utterly disturbing.
Yeah. Like you said, this is Columbus, the Indians, and human progress. And you said it very well when you said the lack thereof of human progress. So there's not too many direct quotes from Columbus that are left here, but one of the chief sources going forward for the rest of the whole Chris Columbus subject matter is a guy named Las Casas, and he is the one who he transcribed Columbus's journal. So these are still Columbus's, words, but maybe not exact because things do get lost in translation, things of that sort. So let's see where should we start? Because it's just it keeps getting bad. So here's a unique account that deserves to be quoted at length. Endless testimonies prove the mild and pacific temperament of the natives, but our work was to exasperate, ravage, kill, mangle, and destroy. Small wonder then if they tried to kill one of us now and then. The admiral, it is true, was blind at those who came after him, and he was so anxious to please the king that he committed irreparable crimes against the Indians. It just goes on and on like that. If you want to keep, hearing all these different quotes about Columbus from Bartolome de las Casas, then definitely jump into the book. We won't cover all of them here, but it goes on and on. So
you alluded to it.
Say,
yeah, exactly. I apologize for stepping on toes once again. It's a difficult thing to do via Skype, Zoom, whatever. But you alluded to it earlier that when the Arawak had an opportunity and they said, fuck this, and they decided to commit suicide, their first reaction was to run and to try and get away. This is our land. We know it better than anybody else. Let's see if we can get away from these people.
Right.
And whenever they were caught, they were tortured, beaten, and then killed.
And hanged.
And hanged and burned. I'm not sure why exactly the burning took place. That's something I feel I should have looked up now that we're talking about it. Why, in fact, early time creation, if you will, or cremation, was such a big part. But hanging was a symbol of don't mess with our leadership. That's they would put the death of a human body on display to show and manifest their power.
Yeah, show that, give them a message. I think I found a quote from Zinn here. So they fled, were hunted down with dogs, and were killed. When the Spaniards took prisoners, they hanged them or burned them to death. And then that begins the mass suicide.
It's they say time plus tragedy equals comedy. And throughout our conversation, I have different things that pop into my head. When you said that they would unleash the dogs, I have rest in peace to Mr. Jones, but I have him in the back of my mind saying, run, Mr. Postman. Don't let that dog bite you in the ass. And I'm just sitting there wishing and hoping that these people could get away from the Spaniards and the crew of Columbus, but it's just you try to make light of it 500 years after,
right?
600 years after, and there's nothing really funny about it, but you do what you can to help get yourself through what took place.
Right. If we don't laugh, we'll cry. Right.
Exactly. So, that's exactly what you do. You laugh to keep yourself from crying. And not that there's spoilers or spoiler alerts. Many of us have seen firsthand what's going on in these days and age, but we're going to be dealing with slavery at some point in the next coming very soon. I think we even delve into it in chapter 2, our next chapter as well. And it's hard not to think of Dave Chappelle, which is the greatest comedian of our time, and his speakings about slavery and how things went down. And the quote that keeps coming to mind is, oh, look, there's a boat with some white people on it. I'm going to go see what they want. And then he's in chains. So nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. So
one more, let's do one more horrific quote, just, kind of burn this into people's memories here. The husbands and wives were together only once every 8 or 10 months. And when they met, they were so exhausted and depressed on both sides, they ceased to procreate. As for the newly born, they died early because their mothers, overworked and famished, had no milk to nurse them. And for this reason, while I was in Cuba, 7,000 children died in 3 months. Some mothers even drowned their babies from sheer desperation. In this way, husbands died in the mines, wives died at work, and children died from lack of milk. And in a short time, this land, which was so great, so powerful, and fertile, was depopulated. My eyes have seen these acts so foreign to human nature, and now I tremble as I write. And that was from Bartolome de las Casas.
The irony of the situation is De las Casas says acts that are so. Can you repeat the quote? Did you close your book? The last sentence of the quote.
My eyes have seen these acts so foreign to human nature, and now I tremble as I write.
The irony is, my eyes have seen these acts so foreign to human nature that have become second nature to a newer generation of people with the mistreatment and handling of human life. So Bartolome is not alone. He's seen some shit, and every generation from here on out, from then on out, I guess is the better way to say it, has also went through their own periods of genocide, torture, war, whatever you can think of. But by no means does it get any better for longer periods of time.
Right. So it's believed that even if some figures were exaggerated by Las Casas, but he's saying there was about 3 million. Some scholars are saying there may have been about 1 million. Others are saying there could have been up to as many as 8 million Arawaks and Indians. There's maybe 60,000 living on the island after all that. So,
and there was a part of Connecticut, or what now is Connecticut, that they were speaking of. I'm not sure if you have the numbers written down in your notes, but there was a part of Connecticut which had a specific number of Arawak there as well, and the number in 15. You know what? I might have had this written down. Give me 1 second. It goes from 1550. There was 50,000 left, or excuse me, 1515. There was 50,000 Arawak left.
Okay.
1550, 500 left. To 1650, the population of them being 0.
Wow.
Known left. So it was a complete and utter.
I mean, talk about definition of genocide, right?
Yeah, they did and came and took care of what they were looking to do. Let me rephrase that. That's a stupid statement. I caught myself. They did the exact opposite of what they came and were looking to do. They were coming to the land to try and get rich off of gold, spices, and other means that weren't human, and they failed miserably. Mm-hmm. So in a last-ditch effort, they decided to turn to human sale and human trafficking for sex and labor, and so they weren't successful. They just got frustrated about being unsuccessful and killed millions upon the way.
There's a detail that we'll get to, I think, at towards the end of the episode, that makes all of those deaths even worse somehow. There's a little bit of a teaser, and can't wait to get to that. And I picked out a quote from Zinn specifically for you.
All right.
Because you were talking about discussing some of these things with some of these subjects with teachers, and whether or not this was like something that they learned, or was it like a deliberate omission? So here's a quote from Zinn. "This is not intentional deception. The historian has been trained in a society in which education and knowledge are put forward as technical problems of excellence and not as tools for contending social classes, races, nations." So in Zinn's opinion, it's not an intentional deception, but all the historians themselves, seems to me, they're all indoctrinated too. They've all been propagandized. This is the only information that they have available to them. That's the curriculum. That's what they learn. So that's what they teach. And then it's just this vicious cycle of misinformation and, at worst, disinformation.
There was, I forget the author's name, and I apologize again, but there's a part in the book in which they speak about the most knowledgeable writer about Christopher Columbus. And throughout the initial pages of a book that he wrote in regards to Christopher Columbus, they throw the fact of genocide in there in the middle of a page that takes up no more than one sentence specifically, as the deaths of so many people didn't mean anything, but he was being praised throughout the rest of the book for his navigational skills and his leadership skills. Mm-hmm. And
so I'll go over that real quick for you, because I have it here. It was a Harvard historian. His name is Samuel Eliot Morison. He says, quote, "The cruel policy initiated by Columbus and pursued by his predecessors resulted in complete genocide." So he does explicitly say complete genocide. However, Zinn goes on to say this is on one page, buried halfway into the telling of a grand romance. And the quote from Morison is, "He had his faults and his defects, but they were largely the defects of the qualities that made him great. His indomitable will, his superb faith in God, and his own mission as the Christ bearer to lands beyond the seas. His stubborn persistence despite neglect, poverty, and discouragement. But there was no flaw, no dark side to the most outstanding and essential of all his qualities, his seamanship."
That sounds like a lot of ball gargling for one particular individual who was his greatest quality was supposed to be a seaman. And from what we've bear witness to, he wasn't great at it. Navigational tools back then were primitive. You used the moon, the stars, the sun, and maybe there was other tools that were created around that time, barometers, etc. But nonetheless, he was considered by most to be one of the most skilled at his position. And for him to come up that short, and it's a crock of shit. I don't know. There's really no other way for me to put it.
It seems to me that Morison has to say these things because he is just a Columbus fanboy and has to sort of validate his studies and his passion, because he doesn't, he doesn't say like we've said, he mentions the complete genocide. He doesn't leave that out of his his publications. But what he does do is he mentions it quickly and buries the lead. right? So
it's not a lack of knowledge at that point. It's
it's
convenient amnesia or a willful ignorance.
Yes.
Because he does allude to it. He does say, hey, this man killed off a whole population of American Indian or Native Americans. So the fact that he does turn into what you just called him, a fanboy, or even maybe he was just put so much time and effort into the research of one human being that he felt no other way to stamp the man. But regardless of why he said that, the proof is in the pudding. And the way that Christopher Columbus handled himself, and the way that we praised him throughout our youths, and pretty much most of the people that are listening's use, kind of makes you, it makes you feel, I got to borrow a word from my nephews, it makes you feel icky. It's just fucking bad. We celebrated this man for years.
I mean, he's still celebrated.
In many groups, he is.
Yeah, and it's only come to my attention, within the last couple of years that, people are calling it Indigenous Day because Christopher Columbus is the word. Set the shit bag.
Exactly, and we spoke last week. Just to reiterate, both you and I got into this for similar reasons, and most of the main reasoning behind it was, I'm an older man. I turned 40 in May. You're 5 years, 6 years younger than I am. For me to be learning about these things 2 years ago, 38, 39 years old, and just now being able to piece together how things actually went down in history makes your stomach turn, and not just a little bit. It makes you feel awful. And we got into this to try and educate those around us so they can have a better understanding of the past to enlighten their future. And one of the biggest reasons why you and I do this as well is for the children, so that they can be educated by the parents in the proper way, so that we don't make the mistake of having them repeat history. So Christopher Columbus did what he deemed necessary. By no means was it right. By no means was it condoned or justified. But in a savage time, in a savage land, he killed off an entire generation of people, and in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
No matter what kind of civilized or uncivilized human interaction you considered, and no matter what time or course of history this happened, that's just incorrect.
So we're already coming up on an hour. We're only halfway through the chapter. So we're going to do a little bit of live production right now, and see if you want to continue on. It might take us 2 hours to cover this chapter, or we just make it a two-parter, and
let's cram what we can and go from there. I mean, I think we're hitting a groove. Maybe we can get through the rest of it, and we've alluded to a lot of killing. I think the people at home are getting the point of that. The shit's going to continue, so maybe we can condense it and get it done in a half hour. If it takes 2 hours, so be it. You'll have to listen to it on 1.5 speed, folks. We apologize.
Which you should do anyway, because there's just a lot of empty space.
I read at a 4th grade level, and I listen at a 3rd grade level. So,
okay. Well, like I said, some live production. So let me stop this recording and start a new one, because like I said, we hit the hour mark there. So let me save that. This is good. This is good stuff. For
Oh.
tell the folks the background story on that.
I had this delusion when we first started the idea of video streaming our podcast. Rob and I have done podcasts before, but it's mostly about things that in the grand scheme of life don't matter. Sports, fantasy football, things, sports.
More sports.
So I was trying to look aristocratic, in case you couldn't tell by my prop, and I wanted to go the route of Inspector Gadget with have the book cracked open like this as I'm reading, and then do one of these numbers. Welcome in.
I'm Joshua Bottomtooth.
Yes, yeah, I'm Joshua. And unfortunately, this one does not blow bubbles. So
it doesn't. That's my favorite part is it doesn't blow bubbles, and you can't even smoke real tobacco out of it. It is a true prop.
It is a prop. Yes, I could use it as a costume when I go as Sherlock Holmes, or but that's about it.
Or Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Bastards, like we talked about.
Exactly.
All right, so we're at part 2. We're gonna shift it a little bit. So I just want to start off part 2 with a Zinn quote here. My viewpoint in telling the history of the United States is different, that we must not accept the memory of states as our own. Nations are not communities and never have been. The history of any country, presented as the history of a family, conceals fierce conflicts of interest, sometimes exploding, most often repressed, between conquerors and conquered, masters and slaves, capitalists and workers, dominators and dominated in race and sex. And in such a world of conflict, a world of victims and executioners, it is the job of the thinking people, as Albert Camus suggested, not to be on the side of the executioners.
I think one of the greatest points that Zinn alludes to in a almost a halftime of chapter 1 is where he tells you where he's coming from by writing this book. And he said that I don't want to give people the wrong impression, so I might as well get this out of the way now. This book will be told from the point of view of the oppressed, essentially. And one of the quotes he used is, the way of the poor is not, or excuse me, the cry of the poor is not always just, but if you don't listen to it, you'll never know what justice is. And that one kind of struck home to me, because at times people are going to come up with false information, as you see with modern day media, Facebook, social media platforms, all across the board. And it's your job to be educated enough to decipher what's true, what's false, and then in turn disseminate that information to the people in your life that you care about. So
right.
He said here that there could be false cries, but if you don't listen to them, regardless, true or false, you'll never understand what true justice is. And we're still looking for true justice in 2021.
Amen, brother. So let me, I will give you the Zinn quote that you're referring to, just so people, and then
I just gave the goddamn quote.
Take notes here, because there's so many things that he says in this quote that you're going to want to do your own research on. So Zin says, I prefer to try to tell the story of the discovery of America from the viewpoint of the Arawaks, of the Constitution from the standpoint of the slaves, of Andrew Jackson as seen by the Cherokees, of the Civil War as seen by the New York Irish, of the Mexican War as seen by the deserting soldiers of Scott's army, of the rise of industrialism as seen by the young women of the Lowell textile mills, of the Spanish-American War as seen by the Cubans, the conquest of the Philippines as seen by the black soldiers of Luzon, the Gilded Age as seen by Southern farmers, the First World War as seen by socialists, the Second World War as seen by pacifists, the New Deal as seen by blacks in Harlem, the post-war American empire as seen by peons in Latin America, and so on, to the limited extent that any one person, however he or she strains, can see history from the standpoint of others. So that's what all of us should be trying to do, right? We should be, that old trope, putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes and walking a mile or two in those shoes so that you can see where they're coming from. People are just, I understand the anxiety of worrying about yourself and your family, and family's number one, but there are other people in the world who may need a little bit of help, and for any number of reasons, whether if it's a person who is disabled, or somebody who grew up in a neighborhood who didn't have good resources like a good education,
impoverished communities.
Right. So, just try to think of others as you go along. Try to do, what's best for your family as well as other people. At the very least, have other people in mind. I mean, if, this world is about love, let's love each other. Like, why there should be no wars, whatsoever. I understand, like, in the case of the Arawaks, maybe they could have tried to been a little bit more prepared with some kind of, better weapon. But they didn't imagine somebody coming across the ocean and wanting to slaughter them. Now we know that there are some bad people out there, and we need to defend ourselves. But that doesn't mean you get to go out and do imperialism and colonialism and go and steal people's oil and murder them just to enrich yourself and your country. So go ahead.
One of the main talking points that Rob hit to in that quote was he went through, and that kind of gives you a preview of some of the things that we're going to be talking to in detail, which is one of the reasons why I love the quote, because it does an automatic teaser for what they call us in the business. Mm-hmm. It gives you a sense of what's coming up and how far along it is coming up. But I think the best thing about taking the view of the oppressed is that most of us are more familiar with that than being a part of the 1% or the middle class even. It's important to understand that things don't always happen the way that they're supposed to, like for instance Columbus and where he wanted to end up. But I guess what I'm trying to say is we should be more open to people that are having difficulties in life, those who are dealing with problems, everyday problems, and just try and be more compassionate, more empathetic, and have human nature take place over greed and money. I stumbled on my words there. I didn't get out clearly what I was trying to do, but you get the genesis of where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So let's do one more Zinn quote here, and then we'll move on to another just a real piece of work in Hernando Cortez. So Zinn says, if history is to be creative, to anticipate a possible future without denying the past, it should, I believe, emphasize new possibilities by disclosing those hidden episodes of the past when, even if in brief flashes, people showed their ability to resist, to join together, occasionally to win. I am supposing, or perhaps only hoping, that our future may be found in the past's fugitive moments of compassion rather than in its solid centuries of warfare. So the part that I keep thinking about the most is where he says, I am supposing, or perhaps only hoping, that our future may be found through, moments of compassion. And I'm right there with him. However, this is something that I alluded to last week. With the rate of our, oil consumption, all of the issues that we have environmentally, there's no more time left. So major changes have to come real soon. Zinn is alluding to like a sort of quiet revolution, right? So he's alluding more to I think the point of the book, and this is a bit of a spoiler alert, but was to, he's on the side of laborers here. And he's saying wherever you work, you should unionize. People should own the means of production. If not, they should have, just certain rights like vacation days, things like that. Some people don't have paid vacation days. Some people don't have employer insurance. So he's talking about like this sort of quiet revolution by having all these little individual battles won, all these small group battles won by unionizing at the workplace. And that was a really, really great idea when, this was first copyrighted in 1980. But this is 41 years later, and things have just gotten progressively worse. And something's got to be done real soon. So like we were saying last week, try to do something locally. And
yeah, politics. I don't know. Politics isn't. I'm sorry. Politics isn't something that happens once every 4 years. You got to get involved at the local level of government and find your candidates that you believe will make substantial change. And by doing that, you can actually rejuvenate your hope in humanity and try and get some things done. Because once you get to the level of presidency, they have already been corrupted by oil and the NRA and big pharma and whatever other institution that has shit tons of money to throw at them to influence how policy is determined. They've already been infiltrated and they've already been contaminated, if you will. So your only chance to make change in government is to get into it at the local level, and hopefully that from the ground up they can build the communities that you are hoping for. Of course, it's important to go out and vote for who's going to be your president and vice president and judges and mayors and things like that, but it starts at the local level, not just we're talking about cities, townships, not just for Chicago and the United States, and even larger, or excuse me, not even larger than the United States, but you get what I'm saying. You got to start at the bottom up to hopefully make a change.
So we can move on to so after Columbus, what he did to the Arawaks, Hernando Cortez did to the Aztecs of Mexico, and then so I'll try to give like one or two examples so we're not beating the proverbial horse. And there's examples from Pizarro, what he did to the Incas of Peru, and then of course what the English settlers of Virginia and New England did to the Powhatans and the Pequot Indians.
All right.
It gets so good. Okay, there was a new Spanish Armada sent with Hernando Cortez, and he's white guy who comes ashore in Veracruz, and the Aztecs thought there was he was this man god who died like 300 years before that, and with this Aztec man god promised to come back. So they see Cortez coming, and they're like, "Holy shit, he's white." This might be. I hope I don't butcher this name. Name. I can't even say name. How am I going to say the name of the name? Quetzalcoatl. So they think that he's Quetzalcoatl, and what's the guy's name? So the head Aztec. Montezuma. So he's like, he gives him these enormous treasures because he thinks he is this Aztec man god. But while he's giving him all these treasures and gold and silver, he's also like trying to basically buy him off and send him back on his way, because Montezuma had it how he wanted it there, and he didn't want some Aztec man god fucking up his shit, basically.
Right.
So in Cholula, this is from Zinn, he invited the headmen of Cholula nation to the square, and when they came with thousands of unarmed retainers, Cortez's many army of Spaniards posted around the square with cannon, armed with crossbows, mounted on horses, massacred them down to the last man. Then they looted the city and moved on, where their cavalcade of murder was over, and they were in Mexico City. Montezuma was dead, and the Aztec civilization, shattered, was in the hands of the Spaniards, and all of this is told in the Spaniards' own accounts. So just more genocide. That's all. It's a little bit.
It seems as if that was a way of life in early civilization. So, like we said, don't be surprised by it when we talk about it even more in the upcoming chapter.
God. So do I just want to skip ahead to let's go to a quote from, who's this from? Powhatan. And he addressed this directly to a name everybody is familiar with, John Smith. I have seen 2 generations of my people die. I know the difference between peace and war better than any man in my country. I am now grown old and must die soon. My authority must descend to my brothers, then to my 2 sisters, and then to my 2 daughters. I wish them to know as much as I do, and that your love to them may be like mine to you. Why will you take by force what you may have quietly by love? Why will you destroy us who supply you with food? What can you get by war? We can hide our provisions and run into the woods. Then you will starve for wronging your friends. Why are you jealous of us? We are unarmed and willing to give you what you ask if you come in a friendly manner, and not so simple as not to know that it is much better to eat good meat, sleep comfortably, live quietly with my wives and children, laugh and be merry with the English, and trade for their copper and hatchets, than to run away from them, and to lie in cold in the woods, feed on acorns, roots, and such trash, and be so hunted that I can neither eat nor sleep. In these wars, my men must sit up watching, and if a twig break, they all cry out, 'Here comes Captain Smith!' So I must end my miserable life. Take away your guns and swords, the cause of all our jealousy, or you may all die in the same manner." And that last part kind of reminds me of the old, live by the sword, die by the sword kind of deal.
Right. For people that weren't 100% familiar with Powhatan, in modern day terminology, he was a leader of the Algonquin people that are later found in Eastern Virginia. And it is estimated that there were about 14 to 2,100 Powhatan people in Eastern Virginia when the English colonized in Jamestown in 1607. And we talked about genocide again. So that means that out of 21,000 people, once again, the numbers aren't exact, but there were close to 1 million Algonquin Indians that were killed off during this period of time.
So this is another the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Winthrop, created the excuse to make Indian land by declaring the area legally a, quote, vacuum. The Indians, he said, had not subdued the land and therefore had only a natural right to it, but not a civil right. A natural right did not have legal standing. And I'm just like, what a piece of shit. My book says that I have civil right and you have natural right, so I'm right and you're wrong.
It's
fucking
dude. It's no different than the judicial system of today, though. I mean, if you have resources and somebody has something that you want / need, you're going to be able to find, by any means necessary, the ability to get what you want, whether it involves rewording, recategorizing laws. That wasn't necessarily a set in stone law, as you could see, as all they did was change the what was it, civic right?
Yeah, it's a natural right, but not a civil right.
Exactly. So if the government has something they want, or somebody has something that you want, they will go to any length to take it from you. And that just is something that you better become familiar with as well.
Right. So these are the in regards to the Pilgrims who came to New England, and the Puritans appealed to the Bible. So here's your Psalm 2:8 that we referenced earlier. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thine possession. And Zinn says, and to justify their use of force to take the land, they cited Romans 13:2. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. So more hiding behind religious bullshit. And something that occurred to me that I never really thought about before, but the Puritans were already a sort of a version of capitalist Christians. Like they already remind me of like the evangelicals who try to take people's money by, through fear mongering.
Yeah, they were a part of the Church of
Taliban.
England in the late 16th century that started to become a big thing. The Puritans, they were members of a reformed version of Christianity.
And again, the Pequots, they themselves are like, dude, fuck this, fuck you, because they're trying to they're taking children as hostages. Let's say, so here's a quick quote. They had the commission to put to death the men of Block Island, but to spare the women and children and bring them away, and to take possession of the island, and from thence to go to the Pequods and demand the murderers of Captain Stone and other English and 1,000 fathom of wampum for damages, etc., and some of their children as hostages, which, if they should refuse, were obtained by force. So again, the Pequots were like, no? How about no? So massacres took place on both sides. So now there's just it's all out war. But the English developed this tactic of warfare used earlier by Cortez, which was deliberate attacks on non-combatants for the purpose of terrorizing the enemy. Here's a quote regarding Mason's attack on the Pequot village. Mason proposed to avoid attacking Pequot warriors, which would have overtaxed his unseasoned, unreliable troops. And that goes back to what we mentioned about how these guys they're not warriors, they're just laborers that they brought over on these ships. Battle as such was not his purpose. Battle is only one of the ways to destroy an enemy's will to fight. Massacre can accomplish the same end with less risk, and Mason had determined that massacre would be his objective. So let's not do a fair fight if we are going to fight. Let's just kill all the non-combatants and break these people's will and just make them broken people so that they don't even fight back.
And the war with Mason, I believe, took place in 1636, and 700 prisoners, Pequot prisoners, were captured and sold into slavery in Bermuda and in the West Indies, and other survivors were dispatched into various different tribes. And I believe they became completely extinct late 1800s / very, very early 1900s. So once again, a whole tribe of Native American people, some of which even merged with the Algonquin at one point to kind of make up a mixture of tribes. I don't know if it was a defense mechanism or if it was just the sharing of land, but either way, the Pequot were completely wiped out by early 19th century, or 1900s.
Yeah, I'm glad you have these figures, because that was one thing that I wasn't kind of concentrating on. It's just
there's so much information in there, it's hard to decipher what's going to be best for the audience to take in, what's best for us to give information. So once again, we're doing our best to give you the information that we deem prudent, and we'll go from there.
So this is a quote from Dr. Cotton Mather, Puritan theologian, and in my own words, an all-around piece of shit. If you want to learn more about this huge piece of shit, go ahead and read the book that I just finished that I cannot think of now. The Stamped from the Beginning, the definitive history of racist ideas in America. So Mason goes on this raid in the Pequot village, and Cotton Mather says, It was supposed that no less than 600 Pequot souls were brought down to hell that day.
That's a hell of a way to put it.
Yeah.
Just automatically assuming that because they weren't them, that they were savages and lacking simple justices of human decency.
Going back to your figures, it says the official figure on the number of Pequots now in Connecticut is 21 persons. That was as of 1972. So
that's just think about that for a moment. Just we go to 1636 being between 14,000 and 21,000 to 21 left of a tribe of people in the 1900s. It's awful.
Yeah. So the other thing that I really wasn't considering while reading some of going through these figures and how bad it was, so many of them died from diseases that were introduced by the whites,
by the Christians who were Bible loving, rub it in your face at any point, that were the ones that came over and gave different, what we've referred to now as STDs to different members or to different groups of these people, and they ended up getting killed off by lesser methods of extraction. Things as simple as not that smallpox was simple, but STDs, smallpox, things like that ended up having many of them meet their demise as
well. We're talking about Indian population of around 10 million that live north of Mexico to about 1 million. Yikes. So okay, I'm going to move on to another Zinn quote here. We only have a few more pages to go, so bear with us. I hope folks are out there enjoying it and just thinking about some of these things. Some things you're going to agree with, some things not, but just more food for thought. Was all this bloodshed and deceit from Columbus and Cortez, Pizarro, the Puritans, a necessity for the human race to progress from savagery and civilization? Was Morrison right in burying the story of genocide inside a more important story of human progress? Perhaps a persuasive argument can be made, as it was made by Stalin when he killed peasants for industrial progress in the Soviet Union, as it was made by Churchill explaining the bombings of Dresden and Hamburg, and Truman explaining Hiroshima. But how can the judgment be made if the benefits and losses cannot be balanced because the losses are either unmentioned or mentioned quickly? He goes on to say that quick disposal might be acceptable. Unfortunate, yes, but it had to be done. But is it acceptable to the poor of Asia, Africa, Latin America, or the prisoners of Soviet labor camps, or the blacks in urban ghettos, or the Indians on reservations, to the victims of the progress which benefits a privileged minority in the world? Was it acceptable or just inescapable? To the miners and railroaders of America, the factory hands, the men and women who died in the hundreds of thousands from accidents or sickness where they worked or where they lived, casualties of progress, and even the privileged minority, must it not reconsider with the practicality which even privilege cannot abolish, the value of its privileges when they become threatened by the anger of the sacrificed, whether in organized rebellion, unorganized riot, or simply those brutal individual acts of desperation labeled crimes by law and the state? If there are necessary sacrifices to be made for human progress, is it not essential to hold the principle that those who be sacrificed must make the decision themselves.
Martin Luther King Jr. said that riots are the voice of the
unheard.
Exactly. And the way that Zinn, how do I phrase this without sounding insulting to him? He's an intelligent man, but he's clearly white collar as being an author. However, he is so abundantly on the side of the working man and the hardworking man and those that are pressed and doing their best to make their way throughout history that he wants you to understand the plight of the everyday man instead of siding on the or taking the sides of those and the upper 1% in most cases.
So I'm going to go back to something that I teased since we're going to start wrapping up soon. Zinn says, what did people in Spain get out of all that death and brutality visited on Indians of the Americas? For a brief period in history, there was glory of a Spanish empire in the Western Hemisphere. As Hans Koning sums it up in his book, Columbus, His Enterprise. For all the gold and silver stolen and shipped to Spain did not make the Spanish people richer. It gave their kings an edge in the balance of power for a time, a chance to hire more mercenary soldiers for their wars. They ended up losing those wars anyway, and all that was left was a deadly inflation, a starving population, the rich richer, the poor poorer, and a ruined peasant class. So basically, the complete genocide was all for naught. Happy Columbus Day again.
Oh man. I mean, once again, we're beating the proverbial drum here, or horse, as you put it. It's same old shit. There's not much you can say to justify how things took place, and it just makes it that much awful to even try and put words to it.
Yeah. Let's see. So we can move on to move past Columbus, and let's see. We can move on to the Iroquois, who were, to put it frankly, they were fucking rad. In the villages of the Iroquois, land was owned in common and worked in common. A French Jesuit priest who encountered them in the 1650s wrote, "No poorhouses are needed among them because they are neither merchants or paupers. Their kindness, humanity, and courtesy not only makes them liberal with what they have, but causes them to possess hardly anything except in common." And not liberal in like the modern liberal sense, but just generous with the things that they do have and just looking out for each other.
I think one of the best things for me when it comes to the Iroquois was the way that their children were brought up. And it says children in Iroquois society were taught the cultural heritage of their people and solidarity with the tribe, but also were taught to be independent and not to submit to overbearing authority, which kind of put it on the lines that they almost learned from their kind of counterparts, predecessors, that preparation is key and we know that we might encounter some of the things that other tribes have encountered. So let's not kneel down. Let's prepare ourselves for the worst.
But to also question authority, especially
Exactly.
overbearing authority. Like, just don't, reminds me of like Noam Chomsky's book, Manufacturing Consent, where, most people get their news from mainstream media, and they're just kind of spoon fed that and take it, take it to heart, when most of that is propaganda on both sides, right? So, we got Fox News for far right, MSNBC, not too far left. That's more like liberal for the times, but for guys like us who are leftists, none of that stuff means anything to us, because we know it's more propaganda from corporate Democrats. Yeah, that's a great point about about how the kids are brought up there.
It said that they were a very patient people too, and that when it came to punishing their children, they didn't insist on using harsh punishment. Even when it came to like toilet training and allowing their children to learn self-care, all of that was a sharp contrast to generations and different cultures before them. So I think that's a virtuous part of the Iroquois people, that patience mixed with the take no shit attitude could give you a deadly combination in certain aspects, or at least when it came to a fighting spirit.
So let's wrap up. We got the two last quotes. So we got a quote. Gary Nash describes Iroquois culture: no laws and ordinances, sheriffs and constables, judges and juries, or courts or jails. The apparatus of authority in European societies were to be found in the Northeast woodlands prior to European arrival. Yet boundaries of acceptable behavior were firmly set. Though priding themselves on the autonomous individual, the Iroquois maintained a strict sense of right and wrong. He who stole another's food or acted invalorously in war was shamed by his people or ostracized from their company until he had atoned for his actions and demonstrated to their satisfaction that he had morally purified himself. Last one here. It is the manner among us Indians that if any such accident happen, we do redeem the life of a man that is so slain with a 100 arms length of beads. And since that you are here strangers and come into our country, you should rather conform yourselves to the customs of our country than impose yours upon us. So again, the Iroquois were just they were fed up with their shit. So
and you don't want to say it's refreshing, but or it's about time, but that's exactly what it is. It's finally a group that said enough is enough. Other groups had that "we'll be damned" attitude, where we'll take our lives before we let you do it. However, with the Iroquois, it was more of a Muhammad Ali attitude with we're going down swinging.
That's exactly right. We got a couple of comments in the chat. I'll just read this bottom one from Raymond Smits. Fox News is not far right. Breitbart maybe. They're pretty close. Maybe Newsmax maybe a little more extreme than Fox News, but Fox News is still just Republican propaganda. It's pretty far right. MSNBC and CNN very far left. Not even close. Like
To steal a line from you, essentially, you have Republican and Republican light. So to say something is far left or Democratic far left in CNN is I value your opinion and I'm grateful for your listen. But
And the comments, yeah.
Let's agree to disagree on that one.
Right. It'll just be a agree to disagree. Yeah. You know,
Fox News is anything but center. And if you do the research on how the network was started, I think that would prove pretty obvious. And maybe we could start next week's show with a little bit about that, just to get back to those who are taking time to listen and comment. We appreciate you. Differing of opinions does not mean that there's any ill will, but
no, I mean, and that's why we're here. We're here to have those difficult conversations, you know, with people. And that's why we're trying to get the word out about, you know, the facts in this book, because most people don't, you know, they don't even have the foundation of this history. They get a sort of propagandized, whitewashed history growing up in school. So let's see. Let's finish with this. I think this is a good quote to kind of end things here. So John Collier, an American scholar who lived among Indians in the 1920s and 1930s in the American Southwest, said of their spirit, "Could we make it our own, there would be an eternally inexhaustible earth and a forever lasting peace." Zinn goes on to say, perhaps there is some romantic mythology in that, even allowing for the imperfection of myths, it is enough to make us question, for that time and ours, the excuse of progress and the annihilation of races and the telling of history from the standpoint of the conquerors and leaders of Western civilization. The part about, you know, we make it our own, there could be an eternally inexhaustible earth and a forever lasting peace. I mean, sounds lovely.
It does, but unfortunately,
we're so far away from it.
It's unfathomable, and it would take a lot of work to even get close to a respectable place for us to be as a human civilization, let alone what you just described it as. So I think that's enough genocide, killing, and it truly is.
For one night.
You and I both chose to do this, and I am not complaining in the slightest, but it truly is exhausting to think about over and over and over again the plight that the American Indian had to deal with when people stumbled upon their countries. And not just one tribe, two tribes, three tribes, all of them encountered nothing but uphill battles from the time people stepped on their land. It was never in a sharing mode, which is the way that they presented themselves originally to the newcomers. It was always in a, it's time for your extinction. So,
yeah.
Anything you wanted to add in regards to this week's episode?
No, I think we're good on all the genocide. For next week, we'll be starting with chapter 2, drawing the color line. I have not read any of this yet. I haven't gone over it.
Well, I was going to say you've read it, but it was eons ago.
Yeah. So I don't have anything in particular to tease, but you know, if folks want to do their own research,
You could do your research. I'm going to give you a couple points that we're going to talk about. This is about where the arrival of ships in North America in 1619. We're going to do some quoting of W.E.B. Du Bois on the color line. We're going to get into Congolese leaders and why it was a penalty for Portugal and anyone who puts their feet on the ground there. It's going to be, once again, along the similar lines of what we dealt with today and this evening. However, we already gave you the forewarning that this was going to be a theme. So, next week, we're going to be kind of getting away from the American Indian and dealing with the plight of the African American people, and how that went about in 1690 and settling in the Virginian areas.
I can't wait.
I'm looking forward to it myself. And I think next week I'm going to need an energy drink, because when you said, hey, are you ready to go? Or do you want to do a part 2 next week? I was raring. I'm like, let's do it. And then I hit a wall, that 4 a.m. in the morning wall. And I think for the last half hour, I've just been trying to spit out things to contribute to you, but it's been coming out as a bunch of incoherent bullshit. So forgive me. I will do a better job of that. And we're not going to go 2 hours next week. We'll have a more condensed version. So, or if we do have to go longer, maybe we'll do 2 episodes, but we'll see see how your opinions are. Maybe we'll put that up as a poll or something on Patreon and go from there. So, before I let Rob take us home, I guess we should have did this at the beginning. I'm Josh Catlow. You can find me on Twitter at Joshua Catlow, and Facebook at Joshua Patrick, the same at Instagram at Joshua Patrick. I share thoughts about a people's history of the United States throughout the week, and we plug the show and the blog, and the podcast. And I also do some blogging throughout the week in regards to the book as well. So, Rob, take us home, brother.
You can follow me on Instagram, ZobF37, ZOBF37. That'll be the best place to see some of the content that I'm putting out there. And if you have anything in particular you want to say or share with us.
Did we really freeze? And did we really?
No, I don't think so.
Oh my God, man. I'm sitting there and it's just you staring and it's not moving, and I couldn't hear a word. And I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. We froze with 8 minutes left.
I can hear you fucking wildly clicking over there for no good reason. I don't know what you're doing.
It froze on my end.
Okay.
Pay your internet, people.
Now he froze. So shoot us an email at revolutionaryroulette@gmail.com, and maybe Josh will unfreeze at some point. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for the comments, and you can catch us later as a podcast. We're on Spotify. We are on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Acast, Pocket Cast, every kind of cast that out there. And that's it. We'll see everybody next week. We appreciate everybody out there.
Shout out to Ken. Thanks for everybody. Dos Pedania Tobariche, and holla at your boys.